tobacco. And now we're going back with Zins, I guess. I keep getting ads for like the pouches, nicotine pouches, but like the ones that like, you put in your mouth. I get like the AI slop ones that they're like, we're selling Zins, this brand to Canadians. You're a university student. You need this. Take our nicotine.
Tobacco wasn't cool for like one generation, and then they brought back vapes. They brought vapes, I guess.
Well, then vapes, but then vapes are like the electronic thing. Now if you want to do like cottagecore vaping, it's like you gotta take a cigarette. It's from the ground, man.
Yeah, it's like it's glamorized in a weird way.
You have to make your own cigarettes. That's the thing.
Oh,
it's the ones
artisanal.
from the big companies. Exactly.
It's like craft beer.
You have to get all that organic tar in your lungs.
Oh my God.
I don't know. I smoke cigars, so I can't. I can't judge too harshly, I guess. Why are you looking at me like that?
Well, no, I guess, yeah. But I mean, that's like an occasional thing, though.
No, yeah. I mean, I haven't done it in a good long while, but like I do it. I have to tell my doctor.
Yeah, it's crazy though, because like I feel like like a lot of people in my parents' generation don't really smoke anymore. Like a lot of them did when they were younger, but they almost all quit. But like almost everyone I know now smokes at least a little bit.
Oh, almost everyone I know is vaped.
No, but like regular either vapes or smokes cigarettes regularly. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Well, even I say our generation, I know people who either do it or have done it. It's very rare for me to find one that's like neither. Which, well, actually, no, that's not true. I think it's just, I think I just got cooler friends. I think it's a me thing, not so much.
It's your social circle, yeah.
It was.
It is big in Montreal, though.
So yeah, I think now's a good time to start.
Yeah.
Welcome to the We Weren't There podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Ben.
And I'm your other host, Max.
And today it will be, well, this week, I guess, it'll be my turn to present a topic of, I think it's very interesting.
I guess I'll be the judge of that.
Yeah, no, you'll have to be the judge of that because I feel like aggrandizing my subject, but it's kind of difficult to do that since I'm the one who poured so much time into it. I'm kind of biased on whether or not this is actually interesting. But this has been like the most engrossed I've been in research just because, I mean, I think I started this research with a baseline of knowledge because I'd done an essay in one of my classes about, I'll just say now, the Spanish transition to democracy. From Franco to Frank No, I guess. I don't know. I'm trying to make a joke about it. To a non-Francoist system of government to a democratic one with the parliamentary democracy that we have today. Exactly how democratic, that's up for you to judge. But that's not what we're going to be talking about. But before I reveal who I'm talking about, I'm going to ask you, Max, how aware are you of, well, Spanish history altogether? Let's just start with that.
Altogether?
Well, I guess, let's say Spanish history post-Napoleonic Wars.
I know that there was the Carlist Wars, and then I got nothing up until the Spanish Civil War.
Well, the Carlists are relevant. The Carlists are
I'm pretty good with
relevant
the Spanish
in a
Civil
very,
War.
Yeah?
And what they got up to during World War II.
Okay.
And then I know a little bit about Franco, but not too much other than that.
Okay, good. Well, knowing about Franco, I think is a good starting point for us because, again, we're talking about the Spanish transition to democracy. And specifically, we're going to talk about someone who was very integral to it, someone who relatively short time as a democratically elected prime minister, but with, a very big influence on Spain becoming a democracy in a way that I think is very interesting and very unique. But it's also a chance for us to talk about how democracies happened without violent revolution, which I think is an interesting discussion, especially because we tend to focus on the big explosive revolutions, right? The French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Glorious Revolution, big changes that kind of shake up the status quo. But Spain is a very interesting case of something that I think has happened in other places. I'm thinking I'm not as familiar with the Portuguese process towards democratization, but to my knowledge, they were similar, but even they had a revolution, even if it was bloodless.
Yeah, it was the Carnation Revolution, but it was, if I remember right, it was peaceful.
Exactly. It was bloodless, but it was still a coup.
Yeah.
It was still an overthrow of the government. The Spanish transition to democracy, the government was never successfully overthrown. It was really what happened I guess just to overview for the beginning here, is that the undemocratic infrastructure, well, the legislative assembly, the Cortes, which still exists now, but it's a democratic one, basically dissolved itself, like voted itself out of existence in favor of the democratic version of itself. Like the Francoist Cortes had some democracy, but it was like very specific: who could vote, who could run. It had to be part of the singular legal political party. And to them voting themselves out of existence in favor of a multi-party proportional representation, well, somewhat proportional. They use like a specific formula that I'm not too familiar with. That's more of a political science thing. System of government, which is like semi-federative because they still had like a number of seats in the Senate that like represented different regions and stuff like that. But the main thing is that people who were in the government before were still in the government.
Okay.
In the new democratic system, most of the politicians, most of the bureaucrats were the same people that were in the Francoist government, right? And yet it was still successful. It was still democratic. It just became so after Franco died. It like at first glance, it seems like Franco was kind of the one person who was holding it together, but that's not really true. And we're going to talk about how that's not true. And to start with, let's have some context. So you said you know about like Spain in World War II, right? You know about the Spanish Civil War a bit. What do you know about it?
So I know that in 1936, if I remember right, there's a civil war between the Republican government, which is like the legitimate government of Spain, and then the
elected government.
The democratic government of Spain, and then there's many factions, but there's like a loose alliance of like fascists and like Carlists and like monarch like grouped together, and then later on there's a split where like the anarchists and the communists kind of break off from the Republic, and they all
the Republicans,
and they all start killing each other. Like they go to war with I think the Republican government also declares war on them. So it's a big mess of many ideologies is what I
think an important thing to mention about like the communists and stuff, a lot of it has to do with like regionalism, like the Catalan like communist.
Because that's mostly where the anarchists were, right? Was in Catalonia?
I don't remember where exactly it was. The subject isn't necessarily about the Spanish Civil War, but I do know that a lot of it was infighting, as leftists tend to do.
Yeah.
But a lot of it also was on like a regional basis, because then there was like the Basque, the Catalan were fighting along the Republicans, because the nationalist side, as you'll see, Franco's big thing is unity. We should not have a federative system. We should not have a system of like different regions kind of governing themselves. There is one Spain altogether, a very Catholic Spain, a Spain where women shouldn't participate in politics. That kind of Spain, you know. Basque, never heard of them. Catalan, never heard of them.
So would it be accurate to say that it's like in the Civil War, it's broadly like a united kind of right-wing conservative front?
It was definitely like forcefully united, because I'll just to get past the discussion on the Civil War, I think let's just talk about the Francoist regime, because as you know, the nationalists win.
That's the important part. Yes, I know that.
With the support of the Wehrmacht,
Yeah.
Wehrmacht of Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. And Franco comes in, but he doesn't participate in World War II, unlike, you know, the fascists probably would have liked, which the reasons for that are very complex. But because of that, his regime survives the World War. And not only that, but in the Cold War following the Second World War, all of a sudden, being on the far right became very expedient, especially if you were on the Atlantic Ocean, because the U.S. became very anti-communist.
Yeah, it has more to do, I think, with the fact that they were probably incredibly anti-communist in Spain. And that makes them convenient allies for the United States.
Yes, no, that's exactly what it is. A lot of it is also like military bases, because Spain has a very strategic location, especially with, you know, later in Algeria there's going to be a communist revolution, things like that. But so because of that, the Francoist regime changes. Like when we say like Francoism, all that stuff, it's hard to pin down, because within his regime, it's not just a central ideology that has control. It's a singular legal party, but within that party there's different factions. the basically early on in the Civil War, there's a merging of like the Phalangists, which is like the very fascist party, with monarchists, like the Carlist neo-monarchist party, together. And once the Civil War is over, they rename it to the Movimiento Nacional, the national movement, as basically the sole legal party in Spain. So that was the only way that you could get into politics, was to be part of that party. So the only way to really have any sort of discussion on policy was to be in that party. One misconception, I think, about one-party systems that a lot of people have is that like there's a central ideology that guides it, and it's consistent because the singular party. Really, it's that there are factions. Then it no longer becomes a talking about what party should gain control, what platform. It becomes which faction of this one party should gain control.
So, what would you say is the like ideological composition? Like, what are the main factions, and like what kind of like what's the breadth of them? Like, where does like at what point does it become an illegal idea? Basically, like how far left or how on an authoritarian or liberal can you be in the party before you're booted out?
Well, let's just start with communists, socialists, not in the conversation at all. Communist Party was banned far before. Socialist Party was not like banned nominally, but by the fact that the national movement's the only legal party, and any other party that's not that is banned. So within the national movement, there are like different extremes, and also the factions kind of change in power. But there were like, there's different ways to say like families. There's a bunch of different ways to say, within it, there's different families. There's like ideological families, but there's also structural families. Like different parties had control over different aspects of government. For example, there was only one union. There was a single legal union in Spain at that time. It was like obviously controlled by the Movimiento Nacional. It was a way to like control workers' activities. It's a very corporatist way of doing things, but it was an important part of the Movimiento Nacional. People who came up through that union became very powerful because they had control over basically workers' rights and labor relations and such. But within that party, the different ideologies, let's say, which the different factions, first of all, were the Phalangists, who lost a lot of influence after the World War, especially as kind of economic, they call it the technocrats, is a very common saying. Later on in the Francoist regime, the technocrats would gain a lot of power because they kind of had these more quote-unquote modern economic liberalization ideas, like especially with the U.S. coming in and like offering money for like military bases and also to support the Franco government in their anti-communist activities and all that. The technocrats kind of gained more influence since they were the most American, right? They had that kind of mindset. Even within this corporatist system where a lot, there was still some liberalization in the sense that the corporations were more privately controlled, but they were still privately controlled by people who had close relations with the government. Still people who, a lot of smoky back rooms, a lot of conversations with bankers and government officials. That'll come up later. But the distinction between like the economy and the government doesn't exist as much, but it becomes more of a thing as time goes on, thanks to influence from the U.S., but also the internal influence of the technocrats. The other important factions would be the Catholicists, or like the National Catholics, which were throughout the whole thing, they always had a lot of control. It was just belief in Catholicism, believing in providing services through the Catholic Church, in the Catholic Church as an institution needing to be a very powerful thing in the country, and monarchists, which I don't know if I have to explain that one. It's belief that the monarch should be the head of state. The capacity of that kind of depends, because obviously Franco was not a monarch, and yet he still maintained control personally. But that was under the promise that his successor would be the legitimate king of Spain.
Okay.
So before Franco dies, he gets very, very sick. He gets very old. A lot of when people say, Franco didn't like this, Franco didn't like that, once you get to the end, once you get to the 70s specifically, like 70 to 75, a lot of the decisions he makes were really made by kind of a group of shady like advisors. They're called like the bunker.
It's actually not all that dissimilar. I don't know if you know a lot about Salazar and his regime.
Not super familiar.
But
no.
he also got very sick. He went, I think, into a coma, if I remember right, briefly. So towards the end of his life, he basically had, like, even though he was the figurehead and nominally had control over the government, it was just run by mostly the bureaucrats at that point. Up until his death. So there's a lot of parallels between the two.
Yeah, it does seem like
Salazar is also not really a fascist himself. He just like courts fascist elements.
Oh, Franco's definitely a fascist. I think that's a big difference.
Salazar has like he's more just like a authoritarian who like really really loves numbers and economics and thinks that he's got the plan to solve like the problems in Portugal.
Franco was not that. You see, I think it may be in how their lives worked out. It's very similar, but in terms of how they viewed themselves and how they viewed the country, Franco was very different. He was the ultra conservative. He believed in, himself, in having power for himself.
Would he have considered himself a fascist? Because I know Salazar like rejects that label.
No, he would have rejected
that.
Well, fascism is Italian, and he's Spain, unity in Spain.
I guess, but would you say? I guess.
I think it's important that I think he is fascist because his big thing is unity. And that's the whole thing fascism is. It's unity of the nation. I think the way that it's not is that the importance of Catholicism as an institution, but that was still subservient to him, to the nation.
Well, it's a bit like, there's different kinds of fascism, right? It's like saying National Socialism isn't fascism because it puts such a huge emphasis on anti-Semitism.
Maybe.
But I'm saying that is a fascist ideology, and just like how Franco can be a fascist ideology.
A lot of these terms can be argued.
Yeah.
Right. Like, even in my head, I don't even think of fascism necessarily as an ideology as much as it is a rhetoric.
I've heard that too, that it's more like a style of...
Yeah, it's like
a style of
fascism is like populism. It's not necessarily a platform or like a system of ideas like communism is, for example, which even communism can be a rhetoric tactic more than it is an ideology, depending on how you use it. But fascism, it's really just unity of the nation above all, give yourself up to the nation. I think it's just, in Franco, it was a very Spanish form of it, which is the Catholic Church is a very important part of it. I was going to say family values, but I think all of them had like a sense of family values of the ideal Spanish person. I think it also the economic liberalization throughout like the 60s, the 70s is a kind of dismantling of that fascistic system. But I think that goes to show how much Franco personally is fascistic, because it's when he gets sick, it's when other people are given more control at least, that these non-fascistic elements can become more prominent in Spanish government and society. But we don't have all that much time, so
unfortunately.
An important event that happens before the death of Franco is the death of the prime minister. The death. I say the death like it's not a big deal. The assassination of the prime minister. Let me just get my document here. His name was Carrero. He was very trusted by Franco. He was made the prime minister, so I think that shows off how important he was. Yeah.
What is Franco's position in the government then?
Franco is kind of the caudillo, the head of state.
Okay, so it's like a president.
It's basically the president. It's the position the king would later have, basically, but it's him. Because the quote-unquote rightful king, Don Juan, as he's kind of called, but he obviously has a longer name, which is the son of the king that was deposed, is still alive. And him and Franco hate each other.
I'm sure that won't come up later.
They have like a bunch of spats, and I actually thank you for mentioning that, because another thing that's important to mention is that Don Juan's son, so the grandson of the guy who was deposed, Juan Carlos, he'd be later known as Juan Carlos I, was the picked successor of Franco from like an early age, when he was like a child, very, very young.
To succeed Franco?
To succeed Franco. Okay. Because it was a kind of way to legitimize himself, first of all. And also it was kind of a way to get Don Juan to shut up, because he'd be like, listen, your son's going to be king, but if you guys make too much of a fuss, if you guys fight me too much, he won't be. I'll make sure of that. And so basically he took Don Juan kind of hostage in a way, but not really. What he did is mostly like kind of groom him ideologically. He gets this professor to tutor him in the ways of like Francoist ideas and ultra conservative belief. His name's Torquato Fernandez Miranda. So Miranda is his teacher. He'll become important later. But
so the prime minister who got shot, or I guess assassinated, I don't know how he died.
Well, he was assassinated by, it was like the Basque nationalists. And the Basque nationalists are a big deal. They're very active terrorist organizations all the way up to like the 80s and 90s, even in Spain.
Okay.
It's a big fear. The government hates the Basque like nationalist idea because of that, because of all these attacks against the government, but also just mostly against the government, like this bombing of I have his full name here, or do you even have? I don't even have his full name. Anyway, Carrero is assassinated. I think 2 other people die, but he was in a car. The car was bombed, and it became a big crisis because this was in 1973. This was 2 years before Franco was going to die. And even though people didn't know the exact year, people knew Franco was going to die soon. He was sick. He was old. It was going to happen. Carrero was assumed by a lot of people to be the successor. But now he's dead. So there's a big scramble. Miranda is actually briefly the acting prime minister because he was the deputy prime minister, which is the tutor of the Juan Carlos, exactly. But people don't really trust him because they're kind of realizing the hair kind of the Juan Carlos has some interviews here and there where it kind of becomes clear that the whole tutor in grooming into like a Francoist didn't really happen. Miranda didn't do that at all because he's still like, democracy doesn't sound too bad. I don't like the big oppression. And like there's an interview that comes out of him like saying that, and he has to kind of like die down and be like, no, it was a misunderstanding. That's not what I meant to say.
But like, is the popular sentiment in Spain, like the average person, still pretty supportive of the Francoist
It's difficult
government?
to say what the average person wanted because if you spoke up, you'd get
I know.
really hard. But as we will see later, it was in the air. It's not just a matter of democracy being popular. It's kind of the idea that Spain was backwards. Like it was not modern country.
Like an old regime that's like...
Because it was very fascistic, all that stuff. Again, economic liberalization came in the 60s and 70s, which is the same process that happened in Europe in like the late 40s and 50s.
Right.
Like this whole process, even though Spain survived the war, right, it wasn't ravaged as much. It had the Civil War before, but it had that much time to rebuild. It's still behind all these other countries. And the liberalization itself shows that it actually works because I think from like late 60s to early 70s, if I remember correctly, the GDP growth of Spain was the same as Japan's.
Okay, so absurd.
So the liberalization, it was crazy. It worked really well in that like, it wasn't necessarily that like Spain was ahead of every other country now. It's that it was catching up really quickly. It showed that these like policies worked, and people were like, well, what about the other parts? The political parts, the parts of joining the new European community, which is like starting to exist, right? Like the predecessor to the European Union. There's a sentiment that, I mean, there's already the regionalism. Like I was mentioning, there's the Basque terrorists, there's Catalan, a lot of demonstrations to become kind of more self-governing. But even among the general population, there's, people kind of generally aren't going to fight against Franco because Franco's been there for 40, at that point, 30, 40 years. They're like, okay, well, the new policies are working. He's still alive, but like...
He's on his way out.
He's on his way out. He's improving things. Again, especially labor demonstrations, all that stuff. It all happens, but it's not enough to...
like bring down
revolution,
the
especially with the power of the military being such an important... I mean, Franco came to power through the military. He empowered the military a lot. The military were allowed to do a lot, use live ammunition against protesters, all that stuff.
That's another question I had as well. Since it ends up being a peaceful transition, like how bad is the political oppression? Is it like they round up people and...
It's less rounding up and more... It kind of depends because in like let's say the Basque region, it is rounding up. It's you're a suspected terrorist, I will shoot you.
Yeah, it's like there's no due process. You have zero rights.
Yeah, again, even after the democratic transition, because the military is that one institution that doesn't, there's no way to make it. Well, there is a way to make it democratic, but it makes it less effective, and the military wouldn't let that happen.
Yeah, they didn't like purge the government.
So that was like the kind of Francoist. Like again, almost everybody in the government participated in the Francoist government because there was no purge.
But like
the military was
diehard.
especially, the Francoists were definitely in the military. The ideologically, people used to how it worked. People used to the functioning of the military as it was under Franco. Later, there'd be like big investigations in these units, like these kill units that would kidnap like drug addicts off the street and like test like torture methods on them.
Holy CIA.
Yeah, and use those for the Basque terrorists. Again, a lot of this is against Basque terrorists specifically. It's a big conflict. The ETA is I don't know if I'd call them effective, because I'm not too familiar with how integral they are in the modern state of the Basque region today, but they were successful in terrorizing people and being a thorn in the back of the Francoist military. But so there's this will really more come out once Franco is dead, because it's at that point that there are kind of reforms. So there's like people, it's already being nudged because they realize Franco's dead. There's this popular sentiment. Let's nudge it this way. And there's some resistance within the government. And when that shows itself, people rise up and be like, clearly you're able to do it.
But to be clear, so the prime minister dies, and then briefly you said the heir's tutor succeeds him. Is he the one who replaces Franco after Franco dies? Or?
No, he isn't. So this guy, he's the acting prime minister because he was the deputy. But people are like, maybe he's going to be the new guy. No, he's not. The bunker doesn't like him. They say like, oh, Franco distrusts him, but I don't think he was in a state to think about people.
Anybody.
It's the people around him who distrusted him. And so the real successor as prime minister was Carlos Arias Navarro. And Navarro is the one who's going to be the prime minister once Franco dies, and Juan Carlos, the king now, not just the Franco, the king succeeds. And the king already, it seems, has democratic inclinations, right? He's already seems favorable towards a transition to democracy. He's talked about it before. Again, under his tutoring, it seems like he kind of had this idea that it would be for the better. The reason why is, I think, an interesting discussion, because it's difficult to tell if it's because he personally ideologically really liked democracy, or if
you saw the way the winds were blowing in the world.
There's that, and also that it was kind of a way to shore up support in himself, because in a way, because the Francoist regime, even if it was nominally monarchist, didn't really give much power to the king while he was still around. So the fear was that if the Francoist system keeps going, then the position of the king is kind of subservient to the military at that point.
Or I imagine, like, if there is a revolution, it might become like a Republican revolution, since he's so like their monarchy's pretty ingrained with the current government, right?
Right, and also he's looking around Europe. There's a bunch of these constitutional monarchies, and these seem to work fine in Europe. So I think it's a mix of these factors. He's very in favor of democracy, but even if the king is the king, in theory, he's the absolute monarch. He appoints the prime minister. He appoints members of the Cortes, or practically everyone, but technically just like the majority. There's still, he can't act too much out of line, or else the military will depose him, or else the majority of the government will just ignore him. You still have to consider support within the government, even if you are nominally the absolute monarch, because he basically was. Legally speaking. So, going back a bit, Carrero dies, successor is Carlos Arias Navarro. Franco dies, and then Navarro follows as Juan Carlos's prime minister. And the first kind of fight for democracy happens in this period, which is 1975 to early 1976. Around this time, the Navarro is this kind of ultra-conservative. He's the Francoist, like, purist. He does not want things to change. He thinks that Franco had that's why he was picked, is because the ultra-conservatives loved him. But his cabinet is slightly more competent than that, in that it can't really be maintained because Franco's gone and kind of and now the king's there, and if the king doesn't like what the government's doing, the people doesn't like it. It's kind of pressure from both directions.
Sides, yeah.
It'll be difficult to maintain. But the king still has to do some maneuvers to get democracy rolling. So one of the first things he does with the help of Miranda, he basically makes Miranda the president of the Cortes, which is like speaker of the House, let's say, or the speaker of parliament. So he gets control of how debate goes, of organizing the Cortes itself, even if he doesn't necessarily have power over policy. It's still something very significant. And it becomes very clear to the population that Navarro isn't a very competent... Well, no, it's not... He is... I don't know, maybe he is competent, but he's definitely a Francoist purist, and people are getting kind of sick of it, right?
Yeah, it's kind of... It's falling out of fashion to be that ultra-conservative in Spain around this time.
Exactly, especially given that...
Franco's dead.
Franco's dead, but not only that, the oil crisis...
Oh, right.
Ever heard of it?
That's true.
The mid to late 70s start coming in. And
not a great time economically.
It's not a great time economically. I was saying Spain was doing well with the liberalization. Franco's dead. Things kind of start going downhill because of that, and also because political violence kind of increases around this time. There's a lot of opportunity being seen from left-wing groups, including the regional like Basque terrorist groups, but also on the right, they respond in kind with their own violence. The military cracks down. There's a lot of labor demonstrations. It becomes a lot. There's a lot of tension in Spain, especially within the government, especially within this moment of transition, which shows why authoritarian governments, dictatorships aren't necessarily stable. It's because as soon as one guy goes, even if there's a successor picked out, it's a big transition because it's a change in direction possibly, and that causes a lot of uncertainty, which causes a lot of people to be very insecure. And when that happens on a wide scale, it doesn't make for a very stable society. And that's what we see, is that with Miranda as president of the Cortes, with the king, with having both of them having these democratic ideas, they ask Navarro to basically add one person to the cabinet. And this person, who's the person we're actually talking about today, is Adolfo Suarez.
Okay.
So Adolfo Suarez, the reason why I haven't mentioned his life up till now is that nobody knew who he was.
He's like a nobody.
He was kind of a nobody, but he within this cabinet, he makes a name for himself a little bit. He would later be appointed as prime minister after Navarro, and at that point, people still thought he was a nobody. Like the general population, especially, didn't know who this guy was.
Can I ask what his role in the cabinet was? Did he have was he a minister or something, or was he just kind of there as an advisor? Or we don't know.
So now that we're here, I'm going to talk about Suarez's life. The reason why I went over this before is because Suarez's life doesn't really have much to do with the events going on the national stage. He's born in Cebrero, Sevilla, which Sevilla is like a province, and then he studies at the University of Salamanca. He finishes that in 1954. In 1955, he starts working with Fernando Herrero Tejedor, who's basically a bureaucrat. Like he works in different levels of the national government.
But he's like an assistant, or
he's a secretary, of this guy.
Okay.
But he's also kind of becomes a mentor in this way because he follows Tejedor in like other areas of government. But right now he works as like town hall. Once Tejedor becomes the civil governor of Avila, Suarez is his secretary. Suarez is, when he comes to government, the impression people have of him, because they look into who this guy is, he's very conservative. Actually, he's kind of the reason why people accept it is because he's not really out of the norm. People didn't really know if he had like democratic sympathies or whatever. What they knew is that the king knew him, and the reason for that is that as Suarez works through the government, eventually he becomes he gets this career for a few years in the national state broadcaster.
Okay.
So he becomes like a program director, and eventually he becomes the general director of the state broadcaster. And because of that, he gets to know the king, because the king has his addresses.
Speeches, and yes.
Exactly. Even as Franco is leading, part of his legitimacy is that he's going to restore the king.
Yeah.
So they get to know each other there. But otherwise, people outside of that don't really know him. So what happens is that Tejedor is made the minister / secretary general of the Movimiento Nacional, which is the sole legal party that I mentioned before.
Okay.
And the sole, and as that, it's a very powerful position because then you get control over the only way to get into politics, basically. But pretty soon after, he dies in a car crash. It's not foul play. It's not like an assassination like before. It seems like it's a legitimate car crash. A tragic event happens, and because of that, Suarez is briefly the acting again.
Oh, I thought you were saying Suarez dies in the car crash. I was like, why are we talking about him? Okay.
No, his mentor dies.
Okay.
And he was the deputy at that point. He was the deputy minister of this Movimiento Nacional. And then he becomes acting for a bit. This is before Franco's death. But again, Franco doesn't really trust him because he knows that the king and him know each other. And he knows that the king has
beef with the king, yes.
Exactly. But Suarez resigns after the car accident. That's right. Franco dies in 1975. It's November 1975 is when he dies. In June, Tejedor gets into a car accident, and then Suarez resigns from his position because he's like, people don't like me there. I feel like someone's going to kill me.
Yeah.
There's many reasons, but the king is able to give him a job, so he stays in government, even if he is resigned. Just in time for a few months later, Franco dies, and then in December, he is appointed the minister. He's like given back what he would have been as deputy.
Okay, so he's still, at this point, he's where we are now, he's the minister of the...
Yeah, so he still ends up being
movement.
the minister of the national movement in Navarro's government. He's kind of like the king's man on the inside in the cabinet. So it's through this that he is able to make a name for himself. Because again, at this point, even the people in the cabinet don't know who he is. Because he's this bureaucrat. He like worked in the national broadcaster, and now he's the minister of
the
party. Like, what is this? It doesn't really make sense to some people. But
would you say he's like unpopular in the party, or just
he's not unpopular? He's not known. He's actually kind of popular because he's like as a young man he was very involved in like Catholic Action. He was in a kind of not a fraternity, an Opus Dei, which is like an organization under the Catholic Church. He seems like the ultra conservative,
it's just that people don't
super
know him.
Catholic. People don't know him. People don't necessarily trust him, especially if they're not super sure of the king's direction of the country. But he's not like an enemy necessarily.
No, he's just like an unknown. Basically.
Exactly. So Navarro kind of agrees to have him in government because he's like, yeah, the king is the new guy. I'll give him something. This nobody. What's he gonna do?
What's he gonna do? And
he's
it'll
I think he's 43 or something. He's pretty young too. Because most of these people in that stage is like
they've been around since
they knew Franco personally.
So which means they were either around during the Civil War, right after, probably. When
exactly. Meanwhile, Adolfo was born in 1936.
So
and then
at the outbreak of the Civil War, he's like a child. Like
exactly. So he grows up in the Francoist system. So there's not too much of like, oh, he's gonna overthrow everything. But it's not even as in this position that he'll kind of make a name for himself. It'll be more that the Minister of the Interior, which in this case is like what it sounds like. It's a minister of what's going on inside the country, not just like a land management like I think it is in the Department of the Interior in the U.S. or whatever. In Spain, it's an important position. That guy, his name's Fraga. He's important later. I'm not going to really talk about him. He becomes like the party leader in the new democratic Spain. He goes on vacation a lot. Okay. Again, a lot of these guys are super corrupt. A lot of these guys
yeah, because by this point, they're pretty complacent, I imagine, after this many years of government.
And
there's so
apparently
much
he doesn't like his job or whatever because he goes on vacation often.
He doesn't care, man. He's just in it for the
And there's
benefits.
a few stories in a book I read where it's like Suarez has to act as like the acting Minister of Interior then.
Because he's too busy vacationing and like...
Exactly. Because that he sends Fraga stuff to like approve because he's not the actual guy, so he needs the approval of the guy on vacation.
But he's like a rubber stamp when he's on vacation.
Yeah, but then because of that, like Suarez kind of embarrasses himself because Fraga doesn't read like his proposal that he's like, as Minister of Interior, I want to send this to other people, whatever. And then people are like, no, what's wrong with you? Why would you do this? And then he's like, Fraga, why didn't you tell me that this would happen? It's a weird situation. But as the acting Interior Minister, there's two important events that happen. There's the Vitoria massacre. So there's a major strike in Vitoria. Where workers were demanding better conditions, political freedoms. Again, there begins to be this uproar as few small reforms are given, but it's not enough for most people because Navarro, the purist he is, halts it, and people know that. Like there ends up being like, you know, a lot of just enough freedom for you to talk about. It's kind of like what happened in the USSR when like Gorbachev comes in and he
Like,
kind
there's
of
just
grants a bit of freedom.
Where like people are like, oh, maybe I can start to speak up politically, but
Yeah.
there's not so much freedom that you don't want to speak up politically. Like, you're not satisfied with how it is.
Yeah, even Gorbachev, I think, was even more willing to give freedom in that sense. But there's enough freedom to people have a taste of what could be, and they know will most likely be if they just apply a bit more pressure. So there's also like support from, there's like an illegal union that kind of brings workers together. I think it forms before, but it becomes more popular.
I imagine they're the ones organizing the strikes,
exactly.
not the government union.
There's also the Communist Party of Spain is also a very organized force. They're like kind of in exile and they're banned from the country, but they're still able to kind of infiltrate. They still have like their people in the unions and stuff like that. They really go into action around this time. And yeah, in March 1976, police surround the Church of San Francisco where a workers' assembly was taking place, and they fire tear gas into the church. When people fled, they opened fire.
Okay.
So when you're talking about what's the oppression like, it's that kind of stuff.
It's just like, just shoot
It's
them.
not necessarily rounding people up, putting them in the camp. It's just shoot them.
If
they fight against you, just
kill them.
So in this, 5 are killed and over 100 are injured.
Okay, so it's pretty significant.
It's pretty significant, and it provokes nationwide outrage, obviously, especially in the Basque Country. But I don't think I have to say that. Anytime something happens in the government, the Basque Country hates it because.
Can I ask?
Yes.
At this time, like how repressed is the media? Like, how are people hearing about this? Is it just by word of mouth? Because I know you can't.
I mean, a lot of it is like there are like, let's say the Socialist Party, Communist Party are banned, but they still have newspapers. They still spread stuff.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's
underground.
Yeah, it must mostly be that you hear it through unofficial channels because it's. I think you can't hide something of that scale. Like, you've got 100 people who survived, right?
Exactly. But during this chaos, Suarez is like kind of credited with preventing even more escalation, because what happened was that. It's not even this event. This event was terrible, nationwide outrage. There was kind of a lot of demonstrations. A lot of people were rising up because of this. And the military was ready to basically just do it more.
Just kill all of them,
and Suarez is credited with, like, keeping that from happening, basically.
As Minister of the Interior, basically?
As Minister of the Interior,
acting Minister, because the other guy's on vacation.
Because the other guy's on vacation.
Even though there's, like, a horrible crisis going on, he's in the vacation home.
Exactly. This is why Fraga, his name is, he kind of becomes... he participates in the transition to democracy, but he's not really viewed well, and he doesn't win many elections later on
because he's like, he's in it for the
in national politics anyway. He becomes like municipal politics. He becomes important, but that happens. And then another thing happens. There's the Pamplona protests and repression, which happens later in May and June. Several massive demonstrations were held. Police used live ammunition and brutal force. At least one student was killed in July by police during a protest, and people were like, oh no, not this again. Only a few months ago the same thing was about to happen. And then again Suarez worked with the forces to be like, let's bring it back.
Let's calm this down there before we cause a...
before we start shooting people again. Basically, the military is ready to just...
They're amped up to...
Killing.
They want Civil War too. They're just amped up for the...
It's not even Civil War because they're the only ones with guns.
Yeah, like, okay. They're amped up to like just kill all their opposition.
To restore order.
Yeah.
Let's say. They're being like edged to do this, and Suarez.
It's like controlled by hardliners around this time, like pretty. I would.
Well, it is hardliners.
It is.
It's not controlled. The military is
full
hardliners.
Of Francoists.
That's how you go up in the military. It's how effective are you, quote unquote, and a lot of that has to do with violent repression. And so, during this moment of like but this time it's not just against Basques, right? Because other people, conservatives might be like, oh, but it's only against the Basque country. They're not Spanish.
Of course.
Whatever. Now that it's everyone's kind of at risk. It becomes popular to not do that necessarily. People want to live, like on the whole.
Yeah, I think people would prefer not to be shot dead by the authorities.
And so Suarez is credited with this. Navarro is credited with not doing anything about this. Basically, the prime minister has not shown himself to do a very good job, not only in not maintaining the Francoist system, because he's not even able to do that really because of the small reforms, but also, unpopular with the king. His own cabinet, it's like you really like his own cabinet's the one who's like pushing through the reforms. They're seeing the writing on the wall, and then people generally aren't happy with it.
He's just taking everyone off because the army wants to be more hardline and kill more people, and then the people want more reforms.
What happens is basically gridlock. Like no one can achieve anything. The people want to murder the protesters, can't murder the protesters. The people who don't want the protesters to be murdered can't stop that.
There's just a little bit of murder, which makes nobody happy.
Yeah, nobody's happy when there's a little bit of murdering protesters.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. So Navarro he resigns. He's forced to resign.
Yeah, he's forced out by the cabinet, basically.
Exactly. Well, the king especially.
Yeah.
Because he has the one absolute power. He can technically, Now he can assert his power now that it's generally popular. Nobody likes Navarro.
So it's just like resign or I'm going to have to publicly. It's a saving face thing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, or also the king. The world, like the Spain will see that the king dislikes its own prime minister, and then that becomes a danger to the prime minister, especially as this purist Francoist, supposedly monarchist.
Yeah,
it just demonstrates how.
So just like resign, save face, and it'll be a whole lot less complicated for the government and for yourself.
And so then Miranda supposedly gives like a list of 3 people to the king to be like, okay, who do you choose as a successor? And he chooses Suarez. And again, even though he kind of makes a name for himself, it's more like this stuff, again, it's more internally. People kind of see, Suarez is an effective guy. He can stop.
But would you say he's more known in the government, or like do people know him like the people of the country?
People don't.
It's more like the government.
All the news I see, again, I wasn't alive during that time. Maybe he was more well known, especially like in Madrid, let's say. But I definitely get the impression that people didn't know who this guy was. Like even they say like centrists and people on the left didn't like him because when he came in, he was introduced, this is the ultra conservative
successor
Francoist bureaucrat. He's not actually that different. But very soon he's going to show himself to be different because he comes in and he has this plan with the king, basically, this agenda, and he's going to push it through really, really quickly. So he's going to show himself how effective he is, not just during these crises, but as prime minister. Because he has this one goal once he gets in. He's like, all right, Spain is going to have a democratic election, like no matter what, in like very soon. So one of the first things he does is that he goes to the Cortes. He's like, all right, here is a bill to basically dissolve this body, the Francoist Cortes, and make our first democratic election that's going to basically choose a new parliament that is going to decide on a constitution.
This is in what year?
This is in 1976.
Okay.
So in 1976, it's this very difficult process because you're basically asking them to, like the undemocratic people are very comfortable in their seats because, again, they don't have to worry about voters or anything. To basically give up their own power in favor of the unpredictable, the masses. Like, people aren't really sure about that. The plan is basically, grant not citizenship, but grant the right to vote for people 21 years and up.
Is it men and women?
Men and women.
Okay, interesting.
Like legalize political parties, there becomes more discussion later on. Like eventually it's like, amnesty to all political prisoners. There's a lot, like, it happens really quickly because like the first democratic election in Spain is in 1977. So in a year as prime minister, he's able to basically dissolve the undemocratic Cortes and has the first election planned. And you can kind of you get the idea of how kind of slapdash this whole thing is.
Yeah, because it seems like something that would take a little more time to plan.
It is, because even if it's not a revolution, it's still a lot of changes at the same time. They just can't call it a revolution because, again, it's all the same people and it's similar ideas. But he's able to pass this through the Cortes. The votes is like 425 to 59 in favor.
Oh yeah.
With I think 13 abstentions. So he successfully got them to vote themselves out of existence, basically by making like a bunch of deals and promises and like promising like we won't purge the Francoists. Like this is changing democracy. This isn't a revolution. That's his big thing. This is to continue. Like one of the rhetoric uses like this is to continue Franco's legacy, because no one's gonna come in the Cortes and kill you because he can't vote for their own representatives, right? It's like that's the only way to do it, is to make it more democratic and go against what he wanted is to keep his system alive.
And I imagine a lot of it too is like no one's going to be prosecuted for all the crimes
a big thing
under the Francoist regime.
Exactly. That's the pact of forgetting, I think, is like one of the, it's like basically like, okay, we'll grant political amnesty to like political prisoners who basically just want to express themselves, but also we won't prosecute
the people who killed those or arrested those protesters.
Like there's a famous case of like, I think there's this guy who flees to Argentina or something who like tortured people, like 13 people or something, as like a police officer or whatever, as like a Francoist in the secret police basically. And there's an effort to extradite him to Spain from Argentina, but it's the Spanish high court that's like, no, because we made this thing, we can't prosecute people who did terrible things, oppressed people during the Franco era, so we can't actually prosecute this guy. It's a very contentious thing, but generally I think it's like, well, we have to move past this to have this democratic system. especially among the government, it's like it's a way for this to happen. It's a terrible promise for a lot of people, but even like the socialists and communists who kind of are able to participate again have to go with it because then now they have power.
Because now they can be elected.
Exactly, which that's an important thing. One promise that was made, especially to the military, because in the back of their mind, the reason why they want to do this quick, doing this quick is not just, so we can have a democratic election. It's so that the military doesn't have the time
to overthrow the
government. It's so like, if we do this as fast as possible and like make promises to the military, it's like, no, don't worry, you'll still be
it's gonna be the same.
Yeah, one of the promises made is we will not legalize the Communist Party.
I figured
the communists will
like
still
that.
be banned.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, after the Cortez was a big referendum for like the democratic election, it passes like overwhelmingly. It's like 77% in favor of.
Doesn't that happen in Chile as well?
There is actually. Yeah, the No Camp. No is a good movie.
It's a great movie. We watched it in my Latin American history class. But yeah, it's a similar thing happens once Perón. It's in Chile.
Not Perón.
No, Perón. Sorry, I mixed them
Pinochet.
up. Pinochet. I mixed them up with him. But yeah, after Pinochet dies.
Exactly. So there's that.
And it passes, I imagine.
It passes overwhelmingly. Like even in Chile, there's it's like 60 something, but there it's like 77. It's like crazy high. But because of that, the plans to have the election in June, and it passes the referendum, I believe in December, was it? It's late in 76. So people have to it's like, oh crap, there's an election now. We have to organize
parties. Yeah, which have been illegal for the past like 40 years.
Which there's going to be a lot of consequences to that. But one of the ways that this kind of works in favor of democracy is, again, they tell the military, no, the communists will stay banned. We'll have the socialists. The socialists can come in, like the Workers' Party, but the communists, no. We're not going to include them. The election is in June. In April, he goes to the public and says, the Communist Party is legal. Just before the election happened, it's the election's happening soon.
We're going to let them on the ballot.
Exactly. They end up becoming the third most popular party as well.
Oh, yeah,
They do very well. There's a quote I had about this. Yeah, which he legalized in April of 1977. And there's a quote I got from a Guardian article of this is what Suarez says. He says, not only am I not a communist, I firmly reject their ideology, but I am also a Democrat, a sincere Democrat. Our nation is mature enough to assimilate its own plurality. So basically he's like, I'm not a communist at all. Trust me, but
I believe in democracy enough to not ban them from
exactly. I believe in democracy as a method to, create the best for the country. And he's basically also saying there's no way the majority of Spain's going to vote a communist in. So he's trying to kind of assuage certain fears. It doesn't work for the military. The military is like, dude, you promised us that the communists wouldn't be allowed, but this becomes a problem. We'll talk about that. But yeah, he was Suarez was kind of seen as a conservative at first, but because of all this, he's able to kind of form a centrist party.
I was gonna say, does he run in this election?
So in this time, parties are kind of weird because it's so quick that the parties do exist, but there are so many of them, and they don't really have the time to negotiate and merge and come together and do this.
Yeah.
So there are main parties. There's also a bunch of small parties. But
there's blocks, I imagine.
They're largely organized in blocks, and soon enough they kind of figure their stuff out. Especially this centrist party. We'll talk about why that's important later. But the centrist party kind of. Sorry, continue.
I was saying, when you say centrist party, is it centrist relative to what? What's the ideology?
It's centrist as in we're not Francoist. We're going to change. We're going through democracy. We're going to have, a bit more social services, stuff like that. But even that isn't clear. I have another quote here from that same Guardian article. With elections ahead in the spring of 1977, Suarez united groups of progressive Christian Democrats and conservative social Democrats into the Unión de Centro Democrático, and Francoist elements of the Movimiento joined Suarez in the hope of electoral victory. Horse trading concluded only 5 days before candidate lists closed. Suarez's final lists were dominated by men who had served Franco. The UCD, the centrist party, resembled a bus, its passengers united not ideologically, but by the route to victory. Mm-hmm. They're basically Suarez is the bringer of democracy. He's going to win. People even if they don't know him, it's this guy.
He's the guy who. This is why this is happening. He's got that. He's pretty famous, I imagine.
He's very famous. He's very popular.
Because he's allowing elections.
Exactly. Not only that, but he does a lot of stuff that people like. So people from all sorts of ideologies join him to win. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a problem later. But for now, it's great because then he has this big party, big tent party. But the social, like, he doesn't end up winning a majority still. He ends up winning 34% of the vote.
But is he like the biggest party?
The biggest party, exactly.
So
the biggest plurality. The second biggest is the socialists.
And then
third
the communists?
biggest is the communists.
Boy.
Yeah, the fourth biggest is like the kind of conservative party. Again, the one headed by the Minister of Interior, who went on vacation
all the time.
Exactly. And then the other bigger parties was like the Basque and Catalan,
the nationalists.
Party.
And
then there's a bunch of smaller parties that kind of
align themselves.
They align themselves. They like merge sometimes. Well, not even merge at that point. They're so tiny. It's more like they sometimes they join
the 3 MPs, the larger or whatever. Yeah, join the bigger party.
Yeah, and even then, there's still a bunch of smaller parties that just aren't important enough to mention. But yeah. So
really, it's like there's a big centrist bloc. There's the communists, the socialists, and then there's like a conservative bloc.
And I also there's also again and then a lot of quotes, but this is another quote about how the UCD wins that I find interesting. Is the run up to the elections of 15th of June assumed an air of popular fiesta, but Suarez's campaign concentrated on the media, where his resources were virtually unlimited. Remember, he was Director General of the state broadcaster,
which he's also in charge of the government now.
Yeah, he's got a lot of sway. It's not just he's also very generally popular. He's also just has a lot of resources.
Yeah, because he's in charge
which is why again he formed such a big tent. His other advantages were overwhelming. The banks funded a huge advertising campaign. One interesting thing I found in my research is that Suarez met with like a bunch of bank heads to kind of support like the creation of democracy. Like my theory is that the way he saw it was that I need a lot of funding, I need a lot of support to keep democracy happen. I'm the only one who can do it, basically. So support me and you'll support democratization. As long as I can stick to it, I can not only make a democratic system, but make one that kind of lasts.
Right.
But because of this, it's kind of corrupt to, basically be
beholden
funded by
the
bankers. There's a conversation.
I'm sure the communists and the socialists use that plenty. I don't know if that was public knowledge or not, but
it wasn't really. It becomes more of a thing in the 1990s because one of these bank heads actually goes to court and claims to have bribed Suarez, which Suarez says like, no, that's not what happened.
But it comes out like under oath that he's.
It becomes more of a conversation later, but right now, I think a lot of the focus, even if it was like known, it's like, I don't care. We need democracy.
I just want to be able to vote.
Any means necessary. But again, communists were upset. Right-wingers were also upset that the bankers were participating in this. I'm sure it didn't help in certain conspiracies regarding people who may or may not be in
just because
banks.
they're supporting their opponents, right? Too on top of that.
That too, but the establishment, all that.
Yeah, the deep state.
But yeah, in all this frenzy, even before the election happens, there's the Atocha massacre, which
oh my God.
Atocha is one of the places where there's like a big train station in Spain. So actually, when I went there not too long ago, I visited this place. So knowing that this happened here is kind of crazy. Basically, a bunch of like neo-fascist thugs killed like some lawyers that were working on behalf of like socialist and communist parties because
like defense attorneys. And
all that stuff. And then they ended up like killing 5. It's in January of 1977. So it's before these.
It's all pretty recent.
Can happen. Oh, this is all very recent. Again, this is like what 50 years ago.
Yeah.
No, there's definitely like plenty of, again, Suarez.
It's in living memory.
Suarez dies in 2014.
Yeah, so
this is not too long ago. A lot of this stuff, people kind of still live with the memories of this whole period. Because this whole period, throughout all this, I'll talk about this in a second, violence is just rampant. Political violence from the military, against the military, from terrorists, from fascist thugs, from like leftist agents, communist, like it's again, insecurity, tension.
I actually have a question about this too. Yeah. You mentioned that because this is still like peak Cold War in the 70s, yes. Right? And I know in the years of lead in Italy, there was a ton of foreign interference.
There was.
Is it similar in Spain? Like, was
it
Soviets
was.
And the Americans getting involved?
I think the American involvement is more preventing a revolution. Kissinger is involved, obviously.
Of course. Because this is,
It's that era. But at least from my research, it didn't seem like it was all too heavily.
Like as pronounced.
Yeah. Like there's a lot of the military, a lot of funding to the Spanish government. Their big thing was like, we don't want a communist revolution. So they worked their best to make sure that, like, even I'm sure the Americans were very upset that the Spanish legalized the
Communist Party. But
so it's more like also Suarez kind of used their support in the same way. They made the same promises the military they made to the U.S. government.
The U.S., yeah.
Because even if, the U.S. government wasn't necessarily fascist, though, they were very willing to support in the 70s, Nixon, Kissinger era, talking about Chile. So, they were basically backing the military, but they also didn't want a revolution. They're like, we want to keep
we
the
want a
country
stable Spanish ally.
Yeah, so if they become democratic, sure, whatever.
As long as they're in NATO.
As long as it's not communist.
Yeah, as long as they're not communist, they're still in our bloc.
Yeah, exactly. As long as we can still have our influence, which is basically what happens. So the Americans don't really come in, but I'm sure the CIA did some stuff.
And I'm sure the KGB probably funneled all kinds of money into the communist parties.
Yeah, no, all this stuff.
But that's a given in the Cold War, right?
Exactly, but it's
not super pronounced. It's not like exceptional or anything.
Exactly, it's not like Chile.
Yeah, for example, or even in Italy.
Or even in Italy. Italy's a great example of that.
In the years of lead.
Exactly.
So it's just the normal amount of Cold War.
Yeah, it's
espionage.
enough to fund some violence, I'm sure, but not enough to have caused change in the government that I think would have happened anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think a lot of these files probably aren't even declassified yet.
Yeah, it's too recent.
we'll find out more. Maybe they have a bigger hand in this than we thought. Like all the Suarez stuff came out in the 90s with like the bankers become like. Mm-hmm. Oh, it was an accusation, actually. So, again, Suarez denied it. He didn't go to court necessarily, but it's known the bankers supported him.
Right.
In some capacity. But another thing, every housewife in the land was sent a letter from Suarez outlining his plans to improve living standards, and the UCD propaganda machine worked especially hard to build on Suarez's film star looks.
Oh, geez.
So he's kind of a Justin Trudeau as well.
Yeah, he's like a Reagan.
He's a young guy, early 40s. 60% of UCD voters were to be women.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it worked.
But it kind of makes sense because often women in this time period were more conservative as well. So they would vote.
There's that, but he also did grant them the vote.
That too.
Because women were already very oppressed in Franco, Spain. That's a big deal.
Suffrage.
And all of a sudden, women are granted suffrage. So whether you're conservative or even more liberal.
A little more liberal, yeah.
Not only that, but this guy's good looking. Might as well.
Yeah.
Like, as much as I like to think that that's not an important
factor.
But
I mean, yeah, but it's probably again, he had a massive media campaign. It's probably part of that.
Yeah, no, it's all of it all together. I'm not going to say that
it's only because he's a good-looking guy.
He was good looking. As funny as that would be. But yeah, so after this, again, a lot of this, he brings in the socialists, brings in the conservatives, the communists, and the conservatives, all the parties. The Movimiento Nacional is kind of dissolved in favor of the multi-party system. It's no longer there's still factions within the parties, obviously, but now you can leave and form your own party.
But my question now
not only that, but unions are also legalized. It's just freedom all across the board. Again, it happens so quickly, the military can't respond. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, very liberal society.
But my question is, like, after the election, since they're a minority government, do they have to form a coalition? Like, how does that...
Yes, they work with... Again, a lot of this right now is focused on, like, consensus building. So he kind of works with everybody.
To pass, like, stuff that everybody wants to see.
Especially because there's this important thing that happens soon after. It's the Moncloa Pax. It's named after basically the home of the prime ministers, like the Moncloa Palace. Around this period, inflation was 40%. Oof. Again, uncertainty.
Not a great. Again, oil crisis,
violence.
Not a good time.
Not a great time. So in October, they've finalized. Basically, they have this pact together. Like, all right, we're gonna work together. We generally have these ideas. Almost every party, basically, is together. It's the socialists, the communists, the like Catalan regional interests. I think the Basque aren't involved because again, they got especially a lot of issues, but. The UCD's involved, even like some far-right conservative groups are involved, basically to establish this agenda of like, the military is already like not sure about this whole democracy thing. They're like barely letting
Don't give them an excuse, please.
Don't give them an excuse. Let's have this economic agenda to fix the inflation, get the economy going to show that this thing works.
I can't imagine the pork barreling that went on in all the legislation, like the amount of negotiations and stuff.
It's crazy. Like half of this is like parsing different negotiations, the promises made, the false promises made, because a lot of promises they are made to like get a deal going, but they aren't followed through with because it's not worth it. But they agree on like economic policy and on some legal stuff. So economically, they agree on the right to unionize, limits on wage raises reflecting inflation, devaluation of the peseta, which is the currency, and tax reform. Basically, that's like cutting government spending. It's the very centrist stuff, especially these days. What's it called again when it's like you cut a bunch of government?
Autarky?
No, not autarky. It's austerity.
Austerity, sorry, yeah. Autarky is when you're self-sufficient, yeah. Austerity, yeah.
Exactly. So a lot of it's austerity, but it's also the right to unionize and some legal stuff, including like the right of free association, the right of freedom of expression, and they also agree on this is where they agree on blanket amnesty. Like anyone who's been arrested for any political reason, anyone who's been exiled for any political reason, no longer a thing. Again, this is when the Pact of Forgetting, like
right, when they're allowed back in the country or they're let out of jail.
But we also means that we don't prosecute people for supporting the Francoist regime for being a part of it,
or for like torturing people under the Francoist
so
regime.
it's like kind of controversial, but it's also generally agreed to be like a necessary sucky thing to deal with.
It's just it sucks, but if we want this to work, we can't.
Yeah, if we don't want this to be a revolution, again, this whole thing is like top-down democratization without revolution. So to do that, we have to have it both ways. So, think of that what you will. And throughout all this, there are many attempts on Suarez's life.
Oh, really?
It's kind of crazy. There's this one example I have here because I didn't want to name them all. There's all like a bunch of instances of like, oh yeah, this time someone shot at his house. This other time someone also.
But
shot
like
at
by
his house.
who mostly?
It depends. Some of it is like lower officers in the military. Some of it is like just thugs that are kind of supported by the military. Sometimes just an ultra conservative. Like there's a bunch of these interests that have different connections that it's kind of hard to tell like where does the order come from. But
people who
there's
are
a lot of people
ideologically motivated,
politically motivated, all that stuff. Like
just people who are anti-democracy in general, or like because I was wondering if the Basques were coming after him too.
Leftists were coming after him at first,
but like the Basques specifically, since they were such a big terror, like they were such a big.
Not him personally. They went after the government, especially they went after the military a lot.
Yeah, because that mentioned they more of a bone to pick.
And
with the
there was
army.
also a lot of terrorist attacks that he kind of becomes involved with because it's like, oh, national tragedy. The ETA killed a bunch of these people, so he comes in, and then there's this kind of tension. But
they don't have it in for him specifically.
Exactly. Actually, the beef comes with him later because later on there's this whole question of like federalism, about like regional autonomy.
Right.
That's when people get more pissed with him.
Because right now they don't really have a reason to hate him any more than another Spanish politician, right?
Again, their thing is against the military.
Yeah, because they're the ones doing the killings.
Yeah, especially at this point, it's like this is the Francoist institution. We're gonna go after them, and the Suarez has to support the military because it's a part of the government.
But it's not like he's not viewed as.
I couldn't find a specific attack of the ETA against him. Maybe some Basque.
But like it's not like the policy of the organization that he's like.
As far as I'm aware.
Yeah. Okay.
As far as
we'll
I'm
say
aware, that it's at least it's not as much as the right.
So it's primarily the ultra conservatives like Frank.
It's primarily again a lot of people like a lot of the articles I see is like neo-fascists. The
people are upset about the transition to democracy.
A lot of people are upset, and this pact. Basically, it succeeds in decreasing inflation, but unemployment goes up, which is the story of austerity.
In most places, yeah.
Yeah. So 1978, there's an aborted planned coup from the military. Obviously, it's aborted, so it doesn't really matter, but I wanted to mention it because there's this guy in the civil guard called Colonel Tejedor. Mm-hmm. He's going to be important later, but just so you know, he wants to overthrow the government. They almost do it in 1978, but they don't go through with it.
Is it because they were found out? And they were like investigators, or is it because they decide this is a bad time or something? Is it canceled by them?
It's a bit of both. It becomes like a risk. They're like, it's not the right time because Suarez is super popular. It's like it's not.
If we try to do this, we might just like incite a revolt.
Yeah, because this is around the time that the new constitution is being voted on. So they're thinking like maybe this is the time because now democracy is a thing, but now they have to agree on a constitution. But that turns out to be actually like a lot of consensus building. A lot of different parties are involved in the writing of the Constitution. And importantly, Suarez is himself, he doesn't involve himself in it. Because, again, his whole thing is like, this isn't just for power for me. I'm not trying to become a demagogue. He might be actually, but this is the image he's presenting is that I want democracy for Spain, whether or not it includes me.
So it would be a bad look for the military to destroy what basically looks like to be like a really popular...
So my assumption is that that's what happens. And
we don't really know like anything, but...
And this passes the Cortes again because all the parties are involved. They all kind of have their say. It's going to referendum. It also gets approved by 59%. So it's not as overwhelming as democracy itself, naturally. But I also think it makes sense. And 59% for a constitution, I think, is a pretty good majority.
Yeah.
So it passes. And this time there's the first elections under the Constitution. And this is the Constitution that still exists today. The 1978 Spanish Constitution is the legal foundation of the modern Spanish state. So, still older than ours in Canada.
Yeah, I guess so.
Funnily enough. But this is when things kind of turn for Suarez. I said this is kind of a brief thing. A lot of this is ram it through consensus. let's do this faster so that the military can't get involved.
And I mean, they start with everything that's just popular broadly,
Yeah.
right? They start with the easy, well, not easy, but the broadly popular reforms and stuff everyone wants to see. But I imagine this is when it kind of falls apart, the big tent party.
It falls apart for him personally.
Okay.
Democracy will survive, but for him personally, like as politically, I mean, personally as well, you know, by extent, but politically things stop working out because once he wins, he has this quote. He says, "Consensus is over." And he's like, all right, this time we have a constitution, we have democracy. This time we'll be like an actual government. We're going to have debates. It's going to be like, we're going to...
But is there another election after the constitution is...
This is that there's one in 1979.
Okay.
For the new government. And
so like under the formalized like rules
exactly.
and everything. Yeah.
And I think Suarez wins like a bit more seats, but it's still a plurality. It's still a similar situation. I think it's like the communist wins like 2 seats. The UCD wins like 3. It's
more or less the same situation.
Yeah, but it's also, I think he's closer to a majority, to my understanding. But it's still similar situation. It's just that now they have a constitution. Now they're not
winging it.
Yeah, exactly. They're not winging it. They don't have
have
to
rules.
create the government around them. And that's why, I'm assuming that's why he's like, all right, consensus is over. This time I'm going to act like an actual prime minister where I have power over the government. But because of this, he's still kind of like the ultimate bureaucrat, right?
Mm-hmm.
He does all this through like backroom deals. He does through negotiations, through talking with people. He doesn't end up being a very good like prime minister because of that, like in a democratic system, because people don't really like the guy who does all the backroom deals.
Yeah, he looks like a bit shady. And
he looks shady, and I have this other quote from The Guardian. Again, The Guardian has like he has an obituary on him, and it's like a very good kind of summation of his career, I found. But this is a quote: "Although Suarez continued to show his gift for backroom negotiation, his virtual withdrawal, partly impelled by a chronic dental condition," so there's that too. He kind of has a health condition, which
makes it difficult for him to make public appearances.
Exactly. Gave Spaniards the impression of desgobierno, of being ungoverned. Terrorism and military conspiracy introduced an element of fear into everyday life. Suarez was giving out an impression of apathy by his seeming reluctance to communicate with party, parliament, or people. Because he wouldn't even show up to parliament a lot of these times.
He's like a shadowy kind of guy.
It works when you're working in the Francoist system because that's how it works. You do the backroom deals. That's how the whole system stays together. And if you want to create a democracy through that, you need to be good at that to change this. You know, people say like changing the system within it doesn't work. This is an example of it working. But now that you're in the new system, it doesn't work anymore.
Well, no, because now they expect you to act like a prime minister, and
which you're just not. As good looking as you are, it's not going to help you necessarily when you don't show up in public. And so that, as well as like, you know, specifically not him showing up in public, there's a few things, like a few big things that happen. And like, I think people in his government get like assassinated by the ETA, and he doesn't show up to their funeral. And there's this one event, there's this gas explosion under an elementary school.
Oh, geez.
That kills like 50 children.
Oh, my God.
I know.
But it's like an industrial accident. It's not an active terror.
It wasn't an active terror. Again, it was like
a horrible accident.
As far as I'm aware here, I mean, there's probably a conspiracy or two that's saying,
but like it's accepted.
It wouldn't have been done by the ETA.
No, anyways, it's accepted that it's like an industrial accident.
Yeah, especially at the time. But he doesn't show up.
Oh my God.
To like commemorate. Like again, he just doesn't show himself in public. He's too busy doing deals.
I feel like that's like politician 101. How do you fail at?
Well, because that's not what he was.
Yeah,
he wasn't a politician. He was a bureaucrat.
Mm-hmm.
Like again, he worked well in the system before, especially again when he's like ramming things through. But now it doesn't work anymore, and he barely survives a vote of no confidence. So there's a vote of no confidence presented by the socialist, like the head of the Socialist Party, and it's like 155 to like 160. Well, it's like 166. So like it fails.
But like
barely. I think there's more abstentions than there is a difference. So like if all those abstentions went to like vote him out of no confidence, he would have gone out. But you know, barely survived. And he gets the message. He's like, all right, I'm not too popular. And in January of 1981, this is over like the course of 1979, 1980, when he's actually like this time the first prime minister of a Spain with a constitution, democratic system. Turns out he's not very popular actually. He was very popular before because of what he did in the old system. Now that it's in the new system, unemployment's still going up. Political violence still keeps happening. He's not generally popular. Again, consensus is over, is what he said.
Crazy quote, man.
And within his own party, because it's such a slapdash group of people,
There's a lot
it's
of
very
dissent,
quick for the dissent to happen. You know, the party isn't whipped into shape as much as, say, the Canadian system, because this is a whole new thing and there's a bunch of different ideas, and it doesn't become clear the direction of the government anymore. So in January, he has his televised address. He says, "I do not wish that, because of me, the democratic regime of coexistence should once more be a parenthesis in the history of Spain." Because this is like, there were two republics before this, and they both failed. He's like, I'm not going to stick to being in power
at the expense
of
democracy.
This whole thing. We're trying again for the third time. Let's have it be, I mean, there's been parliaments before, like, under the Spanish system, but there's like, you know, finally it seems to be working. Let's keep this up. I'm not going to hold this democratic system hostage. He's also probably aware that, like, if as an unpopular guy he stays in power, the military will have a very good excuse. And, well, I'm going to show you a video here, Max, I don't think I can show it on the video, because even if it is on YouTube, it's definitely going to go against some terms of service. But something happens during the vote to basically change the prime minister. It's still someone within the UCD, but since he resigns, he stays as, like, for 3 weeks until the new guy within the party gets chosen. And at the Cortes meeting, this happened. Basically, Tejedor, the previously attempted coup of the government in, I believe it was 1978, in February of 1981, when Suarez's replacement is about to get voted in, comes in with a pistol and eventually a bunch of armed civil guard and hold the Cortes hostage. So what do you think about that video, Max?
I think it's pretty shocking.
Yeah,
he kind of comes in and starts firing into the
that
roof.
was on live television.
I imagine, it's like C-SPAN.
Yeah, it was C-SPAN, so not necessarily everyone was watching it.
But still, I'm sure it was replayed on the news.
Oh,
over and over.
I saw like a French news station was like redoing the footage and like explaining what was happening. Eventually, the civil guard just end up like firing shots into the roof, like to intimidate people, and everyone like dives under their desks, except for 3 people, which is Suarez, kind of showing this final act of like
defiance,
which becomes kind of a famous moment for him, despite everything that happens. Is like representative of like,
we're not letting the military tear this apart.
Yeah, which is his whole thing.
Yeah.
His deputy, who's like an older guy, who, if you watch the video, he's just walking around. He's like trying to talk.
He's like, okay,
what
guys,
the hell are you doing?
Calm down. Like, what's all this? And then the other guy was.
And he gets brutalized a little bit. He gets shaken up. And the other guy, who's like in the back, is the head of the Communist Party, who, it's not his first rodeo, I'm sure.
Being shot at, most likely. So.
Yeah, especially being in exile and being a Communist Party leader. Again, I'm not going to show it here or even like do the audio, because I don't want to risk taking this video down or anything.
It'll be in the description.
It'll be in the description. I do recommend you watch it, because it is at least the beginning of it, first few minutes. It's a very shocking scene, and it's representative of what some of the Spanish people maybe saw live, most likely saw on the news.
On the news the same day, and probably for the
next few days, yeah. But so you asked while we were watching the video, actually, what the plan was, right? Like, is this guy just off his rocker?
Because at first it's just him walking in with a pistol before all the National Guard people walk in.
Yeah, the civil guard.
And I thought he was going to try to assassinate somebody, but he just starts firing into the roof.
Yeah, well, a bunch of civil guards start firing into the roof. He has a pistol, but the other people have like rifles in the end.
Right. But I thought his goal here, when I first saw him, was like, he's going to try and shoot somebody.
No, because his goal wasn't like vengeance. It wasn't to kill anybody. His reasoning, like, people like, there's a lot of different people involved. There's simultaneously to this, there's like a bit of a mobilization of some military in like Barcelona and some other regions. The idea, I think, was that there's some theories on what he was trying to achieve, because he's not exactly clear. A bunch of people say like different things of like what they wanted to do. Obviously, they wanted the military to have control. Right. First of all, that was the big one. First of all, military gets control of the civil government. That's the main goal. But for what reason? Like, what was the plan after that? There's a theory I read, which is basically that like we'll force the king to get on board. But like, since they're monarchists, they didn't want to force the king either. They wanted the king to be like an absolute monarch, and so like they were kind of trying to get away from democracy, get him to be the head of like the ultimate absolute head of state, and then like just that be that. But unclear, because he also might have just been trying to be like Franco #2. He might have just trying to like invest power into himself, and he saw this moment of like uncertainty within the government of like people, like an unpopular prime minister of this party that keeps going. People are kind of starting to sour to like remember they're starting to understand the realities of democracy, which is that by itself it's not exactly like the best thing that happens. But
my question is, the game plan of going into the parliament and doing that, is it like to take the government hostage?
It was to keep them hostage, yeah.
Okay.
And it's possible that it was like, oh, if we keep them hostage, the king is forced to act, basically.
And I guess they assumed the military would mobilize over the country.
Yeah, and they thought there'd be like support from other parts of the military, because it's not the whole military.
Right,
that was part of
Francoist.
this plan. It was the civil guard. It was a good portion of the civil guard, which I think here we kind of have, I guess even like if you're American, basically not everywhere has police. Some people have the military that is police, and that in Spain, that's what
I imagine
it
it's mostly in the regions that want more autonomy with his...
not just that, but it's everywhere. It's
okay.
like it's the civil guard. That's their whole thing. That's why they keep shooting protesters like that. It's because they're literally the military.
It's those guys.
Yeah, exactly.
No surprise
The
there.
civil guard are not exactly well liked among many, many different groups of people, and so this attempt ends up failing. They hold the Cortes hostage for 18 hours until like the next day. The king immediately makes a televised speech saying like, "What are they doing? No, I want democracy. I don't support this military at all." If you like, he does this as quick as possible because he's like hoping that like other people in the military who are genuinely like, some people in the military are genuinely monarchists. They're like, I will follow the king. What the king says is right. You know, I am.
He's hoping to capitalize
an
on
arm
that.
to the state. Like, even if I'm super brutal, it's like I'm doing this for the monarchy, for Spain, for Catholicism. So he, knowing this, he comes out pretty soon after, like the next morning, to be like, I don't support this. If you support this, you're going against the new democratic project. All that stuff ends up working. It kind of fizzles out. They give themselves in. It's very clear very soon after that there's not going to be a bunch of people helping them. And so it's mostly bloodless as far as I'm aware. There might have been like some violence here and there, but at least in the Cortes, like nobody's assassinated. It's mostly just, you know, a lot of them end up going to prison, but it's also unclear who was involved and like who knew about it. This is why I'm saying it's very unclear what the goals were, because it's kind of unclear how many people were in charge, like part of this coup, because how many people were like, yeah, I'm going to help. And then as soon as they saw that this thing wasn't working,
it was going south, they were like,
backed
no,
out.
I don't want to.
I was never a part of that. I don't know what you're talking about.
But I imagine the guys involved in the...
it's kind of like Watergate, right? Like, I don't know if you've like looked into like different accounts of Watergate or whatever. It's like 15 different people like accusing each other of like 15 different things. And they all have different impressions of each other within like the Nixon administration, but also within the like CREEP, the committee to reelect the president. It reminds me of that a little bit, because it's a bunch of people... There's a bunch of like conspiracies as well of like who's in charge. Was the CIA backing it? Who knows? It's still, you know, again, part of the pact of forgetting is like, let's kind of move past this. There was an attempt. Theodore on TV, he's obviously involved. He goes to prison.
I was going to say, did they at least arrest him? He's like on camera.
Even some people in the civil guard that were part of it don't end up going to prison, or at least not for very long. They end up being like demoted and stuff, but, you know,
but they're not like
they're like following their general, whatever. They weren't decision makers. They
get off pretty easy. They
get off much easier. Which, whether you think that's the good or bad thing, you know,
what
I was just following orders is the a controversial statement, let's say. But yeah. So if you have time to see that, I recommend you do. If you have the stomach for gunshots, obviously, if that is triggering in any way whatsoever, please don't subject yourself to
I will say no one gets harmed.
No one gets harmed. It's also very blurry, so
yeah,
it's not like
ultra high def.
And an old man does get like shaken up and, you know, like hit a little bit,
pushed around, but it's not so much. Like, there's no like bloodshed.
There's no bloodshed, but it's still gunshots. You know, some people it's not sure. Great. But it ends up like it was intended, like so many other moments, like the Atocha massacre in a way. To dismantle democracy, to be like, you know, take back the Francoist system, but it ends up doing the opposite because it kind of unites people. It kind of brings people together.
Look at these,
like, oh yeah, the military hates this. We should unite together a little bit. People remember why consensus was so important in a way, and so there's these demonstrations in favor of, especially the king, because they're like, thank you, king, for like sticking through it and not being a coward or anything. Because I think it's important to remember the king and Suarez are like very young, right?
Yeah.
They're very, you know, the past regime's old. It's kind of like there's a big feeling that this is a new era because
it's like the new generation.
Like Juan Carlos is still alive. Mm-hmm. He's not the king anymore. He resigned in favor of his son I think like a decade ago now, but he's still alive. Again, Suarez lives until 2014. It's like it's these young people who are working towards democracy. These guys in the military so violently are trying to wrench it from them. Mm-hmm.
And I imagine they're pretty associated with like the old guard and like the ancient the old regime.
Exactly. So Suarez is still resigned, so it doesn't help him. But it kind of, his legacy is kind of secured in that moment.
Well, yeah, because he stands defiantly. I'm sure that image was spread around.
And then like it's all in all of his obituaries is he stood up against Tejedor. It's like one of the big, like even if like the Guardian article, which is as I read some quotes before, are very critical of him. People understand.
Can't deny that like that's.
Yeah, he didn't do it because it was the convenient thing. He didn't.
He probably really believed in the democratic project, right?
So I kind of want to talk about his story a bit with you now, but before then I'll just say he resigns as prime minister. He stays in the Cortes until like the 90s, so he still stays in government. He still kind of has some influence.
But he's not the leader.
He's not the leader. He doesn't have the same power that he once did as the appointed or democratically elected prime minister. But he stays around. He's like a big proponent of joining the precursor to the EU, and that ends up happening in 86. He ends up also becoming president of the Liberal International. And like I think it's called now the Progressive Liberal International, but it's like I'm not sure if you know, like, was it the Union of Conservatives something?
Yeah.
It's like Stephen Harper, I think, is the president of that now. It's the liberal version of it.
There's and it's like, well, I mean, it's all, and there's also like the Communist International. And
it's the international organization of these different national parties.
Yeah.
Like the Canadian Liberal Party has been in it for a while, and a bunch of these other parties.
It's like how the NDP is part of the progressive. There's a Progressive International too, which is like Social Democrats.
Again, this is when you get to political science, where I'm less familiar with how all that works, especially today. But he becomes president of that. He's still like an international.
He's well known. He's like
especially among leaders. He's like, oh, this guy brought democracy. He's very respected, even if people don't necessarily like his policies, especially people on the left. Again, the socialists win the election after this. It becomes kind of a more left-wing thing. He still provides like the pathway to a leftist government after 40 years of Franco, even if it's not necessarily like, he didn't represent that himself. It's still because of him that
he makes it possible.
Yeah, and so he's well liked. He ends up being granted like a nobility status. He's like I think he's the baron or like the count of Suarez, and like that's within his family now. The king can just do that. They can just it's like a peerage, but it's not like in England where it's like you become House of the Lords. It's just a noble title, which then you can like go to parties and be an aristocrat and all that.
It's just like a social status thing.
Even Franco, there's a Franco nobility, like Franco's daughter, who I think is still alive. I think Franco's daughter is actually part of the royal family now. They're like married into it. Again, the pact of forgetting, people don't necessarily forget. And there's a lot of weird stuff like that. Again, a lot of these politicians were part of the Franco system, and they just kind of continue on, except for, say, like, a lot of people in the Socialist Party and like the Communist Party especially.
I imagine weren't too involved in the Francoist government.
But like the UCD, which still becomes a thing. By the way, Suarez also eventually leaves the UCD. I should have mentioned that. To form his own party, but it's like pretty small. At one point, it's like the third most popular party, but like it's like 20-something seats. It never becomes as big as he once was. Again, he's just as good looking as he was, and how that worked with housewives, according to the Guardian. It doesn't bring him to more power, especially as I think the socialist government kind of does a better job. People see. I mean, they're more ideologically like consistent, I think,
than the UCD,
than the UCD, which was now is Big out of power. Yeah, again, I think it has a more direct vision over time, but in the beginning it wasn't as effective. When consensus wasn't the purpose, a centrist party doesn't really work, is what the populace found. But I think especially with the amount of time, I think it's time I give over the discussion to you. Do you have any thoughts? Like, what do you think? Like, where do you want to start, if anything?
My big question is, my big question here is I'm curious how this is all viewed today, like the Francoist government, and because the whole Pact of Forgetting, right? Is like, how is this taught in school? How do people view that part of the Spanish past, right?
Yeah.
Like, do they reckon with it at all? Is it just like we don't talk about that?
Well, it depends who you are.
I imagine, but I mean, like, it's like in the general sentiment of.
I mean, general sentiment doesn't really exist.
I
think generally the Pact of Forgetfulness. I mean, the Pact of Forgetting sticks because there isn't really these purges or anything like that. The government keeps on going. Even like the Communist Party, again, agrees to not have prosecution against these other things. It's really another thing that brings Suarez down is federation, like autonomous, the granting of autonomous communities. I don't want to get into it because it's like very minute, like a lot of minutia of like, oh, he granted autonomous communities to these groups, which he wasn't happy with because it diluted the power of the Basques, and then this and that and whatever. Point is, it doesn't work. And because of a lot of the mistakes made early on, even in recognition that federation was the goal, which eventually, after like negotiations, the ETAs dissolved, I believe, in like the 2000s. But there's a lot of disgruntled Basques, a lot of disgruntled Catalan people, especially.
Bitter feelings about that time.
Exactly. Among Spanish people, among like Castilians and people.
Well, of course, I mean, like the ones who were probably I don't want to say the worst affected, but like saw a lot of the violence directed at them.
Like but even that, they like, there's a lot of, again, I mentioned a lot of continuation to democracy because it wasn't a clean slate. The people who experience that continuation the most are the people who were at like the most prosecuted under the previous system, right? The military, again, had death squads against like Basques, and like a bunch of people get killed in the crossfire. A bunch of people who are accused of being terrorists are killed even though they weren't. Some people are, but it's also just so brutal and they get like executed. One of the last things that Franco does is he like hangs the leader of the ETA or whatever. Or was it the leader of the ETA? Some Basque nationalist advocate.
The public figure
gets hanged. And that's like one of the last things he does, despite the U.S. asking for that not to happen.
They're like, please don't do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of condemnation from that, but he dies soon after, so it doesn't really matter. But especially in the Basque region, even if you pay attention to the news today, like Catalonia, there's a lot of issues of sovereignty and autonomy. That's where it's most felt. But even like among leftists, there was a lot of disgruntled of like the austerity measures, and there's so many perspectives.
But I imagine it's not a tiny amount of people that are probably pretty upset that the people who harmed them or their families or people they knew got off essentially scot-free.
One important thing that happens throughout this time is that while there's this Pact of Forgetfulness on the ground, there's a movement of reburying dead Republicans.
Oh, I've read about that.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Is that there's a Pact of forgetting the prosecutions, but it's also kind of gives room to remember, especially like mass graves of like Republicans who were like died in camps or were like shot to death or oppressed, all that stuff. There's they kind of have a moment to grieve over them. There's this moment, I forget. I'll have the link in the description of what city this was. It was like a very famously like Francoist mayor who's like, he allows the locals to rebury and even like makes a parade and like gives them security and all of that. He allows remembering the Republicans to happen, and during that kind of, I wouldn't say parade, a procession. There's a big Republican flag that's like waved, and that's not like clamped down on at all, as far as I'm aware.
So there is like a mood of like reconciliation.
Yeah, that's the whole point. It's like it says the Pact of Forgetting because specifically forgetting the crimes, but a lot of it is like it's more like those people would say it's reconciliation of like very, very recent crimes.
Yeah, it's like you're forgetting like actually trying to legally prosecute these people, but they're not like trying to deny that this happened or like bury it.
If anything, it's the opposite. It's opening up discussion of it, right?
It's,
because of all this freedom, people are allowed to talk about it, but even then, the government doesn't talk about it. Like newspapers can talk all they want about
and
it.
The people, but the government avoids it, like the plague. I imagine.
Because half of the people in the government are those people are complicit. It goes against the government's interest to bring those things up, but they're like people are allowed to the freedom to talk about it, but it also grants them the freedom to talk about how the new guys changed that. So there's a mix of benefits. It's the impression I get is that it's a very kind of taboo topic almost.
It's like a sore spot,
especially among like older folks.
Yeah, who live through it. It's like a sore spot in the history, and they don't.
Because I read another thing. Again, I'll have all these. I'll have a bunch of resources because again, I wrote an essay on it, and there's a bunch of resources there. But I'll write. I'll
do like a further reading list.
Yeah, further reading along with the sources I used for this. There was someone explaining like in a way, the reason why people, especially like non-Basque, like Spanish people, let's say, went along with it largely, even if they explored like the Republican past and all that, didn't is because technically the whole, like in a way, the whole Spanish population was complicit because they all participated.
There's like a national guilt.
Yeah, they still joined like the single legal union. They still participated in like civic life in whatever capacity they could, or when kept away from it, didn't fight against it. Like, anyone who did was shot to death. Anyone who was left are the people who didn't fight against it. So once the new systems arise and then people are like, oh, all these terrible crimes happened to me, whatever, it's like, if we all came together, we could have stopped it, but we didn't.
I see.
It's like you said, it's national guilt. I think what I find interesting is that it's similar to Germany and like, actually it's not even similar to Germany, Nazi Germany, because a lot of that's like, oh, Nazism is completely illegal, all that stuff. There's a much more harsh reaction against it.
I mean, there is on paper, but in practice, there are a lot of Nazis that end up in I know they kill most of the leaders, but it's not at the same level, right? Like they still execute.
But it reminds me more of like very post World War II Germany, where a lot of people in the German government, especially like West German, more East German, because East German, communists came to power. But in West Germany, there's a lot of these former Nazi, like they were members of the Nazi party come to government.
Like bureaucats and people who were complicit but weren't like at the top.
Exactly. Like, but that's the thing, is that it's even worse in Spain, because in Spain, people at the top were also
there was no Nuremberg.
There was no Nuremberg. Yeah. There was no opportunity to pretend
that they got all of them.
Yeah, exactly. There's no even pretending, faking, like, oh yeah, like the whole point of this thing is that there isn't a purge. So you can't ignore that there isn't a purge, because that's the point of the whole process. So they can't even have what Germany has,
which is like the facade.
Yeah, but it's also not what Japan has, where they're like, what are you talking about, war crimes?
It's not like a denial.
It's not denial.
It's more like
individuals might deny, like, oh, how much they had to
part of it. Yeah, but in general, it's more like we accept that this happened, but we're going to move on. We're moving past it. It's part of our past, but it's not like...
Yeah, like my Spanish teacher would be like, yeah, Franco was terrible.
Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, she works in university, so she'd be like more willing to talk about it, but again,
it'd be more like it's in the past.
Like, it's in the past, yeah.
We don't need to...
Especially like the further we move away from it,
the less we need to bring it up.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the later years there's going to be a lot more discussion within the Spanish population of the effects of like Francoism, especially like, again, now that tensions are kind of easing in the Basque region, discussions coming up again about Catalonia. I think a lot of these discussions are going to be more opened up, because it's not going to be like two people show up and they're like, didn't you kill my brother? Like weren't you the guy who tortured?
Yeah, but when the perpetrators and like that generation passes on, I imagine it'll be more or less taboo.
Yeah, because even again, Adolfo Suarez was the head of the Francoists. Like he was the propaganda guy.
Yeah, and he died in 2014.
Like the king is kind of he's also like a reason why it can happen is that the king is very, even if he was Franco's successor, he's very effectively put himself away from it. The king kind of preserves his image, because from the get-go,
he's like, I don't really want to put myself in that. Like, I don't want to be like Franco.
Yeah. And again, there's these interviews before where he's like, I don't necessarily agree with Franco, whatever. He's kind of kept away from the keys of power until the moment Franco is dead, in which case they can't exactly keep him from it. But even then, he has to do political maneuvers for it all to happen.
I guess my other question then, is there like nostalgia for that era? Is there like
among some?
Is there like Francoist elements still? Because there wasn't such a like rebuttal of this as an ideology.
It's not very popular, to my understanding. but I wouldn't be surprised if it's getting more popular. Like,
yeah, well,
again, once you get further away from it, the thing about opening discussion is that then you get people defending it.
Yeah, but I'm like, is there like a party that like claims that legacy at all?
I'm sure there is a party,
But like of any
I don't know
significance.
how. Yeah, that's what I don't know.
Okay.
Not significant enough to be one of the major parties.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
I was certain of that because.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they probably would have won after the election. After the elections were called, right? You
Yeah.
wouldn't have seen like the communists and the
It's
socialists.
not like in Italy.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, in Italy, where there's like a.
But I also think Italy's end of that happened way earlier, right? They had more time to romanticize Mussolini.
Yeah, and there was also the fascist party was banned for a minute, and then they kind of reformed later under a different name.
So that's also the benefit of the Pact of Forgetfulness, is that like forgetfulness. I keep saying that. Forgetfulness.
Forgetting the pact.
Yeah, the Pact of Forgetting. Again, that's what the Wikipedia page says. I don't know.
It's probably a different name.
It's
in
not
Spanish.
even. It's not an actual thing. It's like nobody signed the pact.
No, but it's what it's called. I guess.
It's the concept, right? The concept of forgetting, quote unquote, that it happened. It's that like it's difficult to argue that like the new system is persecuting these Francoists, because it's like, yeah, they persecuted the one guy who was on TV with a pistol who tried to hold the Cortez
But it's
hostage.
like you could run as a Francoist.
Yeah.
Nothing's stopping you. It's just that it's not a popular ideology, I imagine, especially directly after they dismantle the Francoist system.
Exactly. So I think that's kind of the benefit of the way that it happened. I'm not saying necessarily it's a good thing. I think it's a discussion that's still happening. Especially I think it's a discussion that needs to happen later once we're further away from it. Because the legacies of the Franco system keep going. Like I mentioned, there's the military death squads, like with like the intelligence agency in Spain, that were involved in kidnapping drug addicts and killing Basques that probably didn't deserve it. Especially within the military, it's a big thing. Franco kind of lived on. The Franco legacy continued in the military in Spain, in like the civil guard, for a while afterwards. Again, the issues with the ETA didn't really, quote unquote, resolve until like the 2000s.
Right.
So
there was still an element of that.
Yeah.
It wasn't a clean break from the.
There never was a clean break, and especially in the military, that more than
even
like,
in the
even it
civil
came out
government.
later in like 80, 82. There was like another coup attempt. Suarez had to like say like I wasn't involved in this, like when he was out of government.
Yeah.
He had to state publicly like I was never involved in that attempt. Just because I was out of power doesn't mean I was that desperate to get in. Like continuing onwards, there keep being like declassified documents or like people coming out and saying like, yeah, the military almost couped the government again.
Yeah, it just keeps happening.
It just keeps being an element in politics that especially politicians, I'm sure, in the back of their head are very aware of.
Mm-hmm.
It's a strange dynamic. It reminds me of Turkey. Or like Turkey, the military coups every once in a while. It's just that in Spain, it like never works.
Yeah, it never works out.
So far, it hasn't worked, and hopefully it never will.
But would you say like even like today, it's not really a threat anymore, is it? The military coupping the government?
I don't know. I mean, it's definitely the Francoist legacy isn't as strong as it was before. So even if it was, it wouldn't necessarily be fascist to that degree or in that.
But I'm curious, like, does the military still hold that? Like,
I mean, we wouldn't know, would we?
I know that's what I'm curious, but
like in the American military, it's like a big thing. They have issues with far right, like militias recruiting from. Militaries are just kind of a breeding ground for that kind of thing, you know.
But I wonder if like,
especially because compulsory military service, I think, ended 2001 or something like that, or 6, I forget, in Spain. So now it's not everybody in the military; it's the people who volunteer.
Want to join the army, yeah.
So it's hard to tell. Again, first of all, I don't live in Spain. I'm not
Yeah,
Spanish
I know.
myself. I don't know how much I can say about the current Spanish system. But even if you are Spanish, I don't know how much you know about the internal, the ideological
makeup
discussions,
of the army,
the deep state that's forming in the Spanish military. Not many people outside of Spain are very interested in the Spanish transition to democracy outside of the big points.
And I'm sure that most of the sources are in Spanish as well.
Most
of the good work is in Spanish. And
one of the very good Spanish sources I found in English translation, the only way I found an English translation was through the CIA. Because the CIA, again, part of their declassifying documents, they had a translation of, it's like a Spanish journalist in 1980 was like exploring Suarez and the whole transition up to that point. It's a very detailed work.
And they like included it as like supplemental material to their.
Well, it was like one of their reports on like Western Europe to like understand what the hell's going on over there. They had a translation of that book.
All right, they had someone do interesting.
Yeah, and it was it's part of the declassified CIA documents. So that's one of my resources. And
It was a fun one.
yeah, of course. It's, I don't want to rely on the CIA, so I didn't use.
But it can reveal a lot, I think, especially about the American.
And they did have an interest in being well informed, so I don't necessarily think that what they wrote is wrong. But it goes to show who was the most interested was, state actors, not necessarily the general population of, say, the Anglophone world in general. But yeah, I think we spent a lot of time on this.
It's gonna be a long one.
It is gonna be.
It's really interesting. I must say.
It's a very. I mean, that's the thing about modern history, right? It's we have so much information to parse through.
It's the opposite of dealing with ancient history. We've got like one fragment of a singular text, and that's all your info about one guy. Here you've got all the newspaper clippings, the video footage.
It is, and I'm just hoping that there
witnesses.
isn't this one account that like disproves half of what I said.
You missed the one source in Spanish. It's like an obscure newspaper.
I probably did. But if there's anything like that, and anyone listening is familiar, I'm hoping they would put that in the comments. But I think with that, we should end it there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It was a great topic.
Thank you. I hope I didn't speak too fast.
No, I think we were all right. We're heading up on 2 hours now.
Yeah, we're 2 hours.
It's going to be like our longest
Even
episode
if I did speak fast, I think that was necessary to keep it within time. Maybe we should consider doing 2-parters every once in a while.
Put in the comments, do you want to see 2-parters?
Maybe.
We're not sure yet. We're still playing with the format.
Yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed, because the research for this was very interesting. I think every few sources I found something, and I found a different element to it.
I think this might be our most detailed episode yet, so I found this very, very fascinating, and it's something I knew nothing about, and I feel much more informed now. So thank you.
No problem. More people should learn about other countries, not necessarily because it's important, but just to kind of make those parallels, right? To not only gain a greater appreciation of your own country sometimes, but to understand politics, because not everything that happens at home is necessarily inevitable or how it works everywhere else. It's everything's unique. Again, Spanish transition to democracy, very different from Germany's, very different from Japan's, very different from, well, similar to Portugal's, but very different in some interesting ways. But yeah, with that said,
nice note to end on.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you so much for listening to the We Weren't There podcast. We'll see you again Wednesday.
Yeah. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.